I'm going to put spotlight on you, Prabhu. So, participants. Yes, Prabhu, we are live on Facebook, ISKCON Atlanta page.
Okay.
So, Prabhu, if you give me a few seconds, can I quickly introduce you, please?
Sure, please.
Hare Krishna. So, thank you so much, dear Madhavananda Prabhu, for giving us your association today. So, dear devotees of New Panihati Dham and devotees joining us from other cities also, both on Zoom as well as on Facebook Live. We are very, very honored and very, very happy to introduce our very special speaker for this very special satsang entitled Bhava-grahi Janardana. And our esteemed speaker for today is His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu. Madhavananda Prabhu is a very intimate disciple of Sri Srimad Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj. And as we all know, Srila Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj is a very, very dear disciple of our founder Acharya, His Divine Grace, Abhay Charana Aravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada entrusted Srila Gaur Govind Maharaj with the very, very important task of translating all of his books, entire Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, into one of our Acharya languages, one of the languages spoken by our Acharyas, that is the Odia language. Because as we know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement spread Bengal and Orissa, and Mahaprabhu was living in Puri, in Odisha for so many years of his life, of his pastime. So many acharyas lived in the, spoke the Oriyan language. And Srila Prabhupada gave this task of translating all his books into Oriya to Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Swami Maharaj. Gaur Govind Swami Maharaj was one of the GBCs of our movements, one of the most beloved acharyas and gurus in our movement. And he came to New Panihati Dham, ISKCON Atlanta, in the year 1993, is that right? Or 1994?
94, definitely.
1994?
Yeah, also.
And His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu was with Srila Gaur Govind Maharaj when they came to ISKCON Atlanta. So Prabhuji has got very fond memories of being in Atlanta. And when I requested him to kindly speak to us, he immediately agreed. He said, yes, I have very good memories of being in Atlanta with Srila Guru Maharaj, and I will be very happy to speak. So Madhavanand Prabhu has served as the editor and director of Gopalji publication and the Krishna Kathamrit Bindu magazine, which we all read every Ekadashi it comes out. It's a free online magazine. And also there are the bigger versions, Krishna Kathamrit. So we all remember those seminars on Vaishnava Aparadh, the seminar on Jagannath, the mystery of Lord Jagannath. They were all based on these books that Madhavananda Prabhu publishes through Gopalji publication. So very, very important service Prabhuji is doing. And every day, practically, he goes live on his Facebook page. And he gives very, very inspiring classes. And so many ISKCON leaders all over the world, they consider Madhavananda Prabhu as their friend, philosopher, and guide. So we are very, very fortunate to have such an exalted personality as Madhavananda Prabhu, who is a Dhamvasi, lives at Sri Nilachal Dham, Jagannath Puri. Currently, he is addressing us from Sri Mayapur Dham. So we would like to welcome Madhavananda Prabhu with love, gratitude, and enthusiasm. Let us unmute ourselves and let us welcome Srila Madhavananda Prabhu by loudly. Everybody unmute. I will mute all of you again. So just unmute and very chaotically let us welcome His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu by 3 times loudly chanting Hari Bol!
Hari Bol!
Hari Bol!
Hari Bol!
Hare Krishna. So dear devotees, please mute yourself, everyone. And let us, without further taking any more time, I request Madhavananda Prabhu to please take over and enlighten us. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Gadadhar Prabhu. little embarrassed and humbled by what he's saying. It reminds me of something I heard once someone say. It's a prayer. Dear God, please let me become all the things that my cat thinks I am. So I pray that I can become just a little bit of what Adi Gadadhar Prabhu sees in me. So I feel very blessed to join with all of you tonight, and also a little bit shy. The Atlanta Temple is one of the most important temples in the world, in my estimation. Although you may not feel that so much. I lived in America for many years. I joined in Los Angeles. And Atlanta is not what you always think of as the biggest, most important temple, but I consider it one of the most important temples because Srila Prabhupada visited there, and because of the devotion of the devotees there, the things that have taken place there. It's also close to my heart, as Adi Gadadhar Prabhu said, it was in 1994. My revered spiritual master visited there. We made a book based on some of the lectures he gave there. Maybe some of you have seen that book. It's called Mathura Meets Vrindavan. And the whole book is based on the talks he gave there in Atlanta, Georgia. So at the same time, of course, a temple is not just buildings and bricks, but it's the sangha of devotees. It's the heart of the devotees. And that's not something so easy to enter into. We can say, yes, this person's an ISKCON devotee and you come into class, but to enter into the heart of the devotees is not such an easy thing. And that's really what Krishna Katha is about. The 11th canto of the Bhagavatam describes Parasparam Kathanam Bhavanam Bhagavad-visam Mito Rata Mitas Tushta Nivita Mita Atman. That we should learn how to associate with devotees. And we do that by coming together for Krishna Katha, and that Krishna Katha should be paraspara. It should be some back and forth. And Rupa Goswami, also in his Upadeshamrita, he describes that Guyam Akyati Prichati, of the 6 different loving exchanges between devotees. Very important is that we have some confidential discussions, confidential inquiries, and confidential discussion. So that depends on who we're speaking with, and that's not just something you can fly in and say something. So I'm feeling a little shy. Thank you all for being so nice to me. We'd like to try to just read a little something from Srila Prabhupada tonight and say a few words about this. Please let me just say a few invocatory prayers. Begin with Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Shaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Vedi Ramayane Shaiva Purane Bharate Tata Adavante Chamadhecha Hari Savatagiyate Mukam Karodi Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shigurum Diktaranam Paramananda Madhavam. So, I also like to offer my respectful obeisances to my revered spiritual master, who is Srimad Bhagavan Maharaj, who we're just going to try to repeat a few things that we've heard from him, and to our Param Gurudev, Srila Prabhupada, who saved us all and brought this Krishna conscious movement all over the world. Gora Graganya Gana Gota Goloruharam Goranga Gudatama Gopya Kopa Vriksham Gopala Gada Ratidam Yati Singha Gora Govinda Deshi Kavaram Satatam Namami Panchakopa Rubischa Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dear devotees, I'd like to read tonight from a verse. This is from the 8th canto of the Bhagavatam, chapter 23, text number 2. And this is spoken by Bali Maharaj. It's a prayer he's offering to Lord Vamanadev. Aho pranamaya krita samujjama prapana bhaktarta vido samahita yaloka palaistvad anugraho marar alabdo purvo prasade sure pita. Bali Maharaj said, what a wonderful effect there is in even attempting to offer respectful obeisances to you. I merely endeavored to offer you obeisances, but nonetheless the attempt was as successful as those of pure devotees. The causeless mercy you've shown to me, a fallen demon, was never achieved even by the demigods or the leaders of the various planets. Srila Prabhupada describes in its purport. When Vamanadev appeared before Bali Maharaj immediately wanted to offer him respectful obeisances, but he was unable to do so because of the presence of Sukracharya and other demoniac associates. The Lord is so merciful, however, that although Bali Maharaj did not actually offer obeisances, but only endeavored to do so within his mind, the Supreme Personality of Godhead blessed him with more mercy than even the demigods could ever expect. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 240, Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Quote, even a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear, end of quote. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Bhava-grahi Janardana because he takes only the essence of a devotee's attitude. If a devotee sincerely surrenders, the Lord, as the super soul in everyone's heart, immediately understands this. Thus, even though externally a devotee may not render full service, if he is internally sincere and serious, the Lord welcomes his service nonetheless. Thus, the Lord is known as Bhava-grahi Janardana because he takes the essence of one's devotional mentality. This is a very important principle for Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And this verse gives some very interesting subtle points to it. Bali Maharaj is stating here that the mercy that you've given me wasn't even ever given to the demigods. What is the significance of making that point, which Srila Prabhupada also echoes in his purport? Well, Bali Maharaj is considered to be the enemy of the demigods. You see, there was some politics long before ISKCON ever had politics. We didn't invent it. It was going on. And there was some politics between the demigods and the demons. And Bali Maharaj just happened to be a demon, at least by his birth. But fascinatingly, he got more mercy than the demigods did. It's very interesting in this story because Lord Upendra, the Supreme Personality of God, who appeared as a younger brother of Indra, he's come to do some work for Indra, to recapture the universe which had been taken over by Bali Maharaj and the demons. And Bali Maharaj, when Vamanadev appeared before him, he recognized him. And immediately he wanted to offer him his obeisances. But Prabhupada says he was unable to do so because of the presence of Sukracharya and other demoniac associates. That's a very interesting point. Sometimes devotees, they feel bad. Oh, I'm not able to practice full devotion because I'm working a job. When some Vaishnava comes to work or something, can't offer obeisances to him. I don't offer obeisances because my boss won't appreciate it, and I may get criticized. But Bali Maharaj is one of the Mahajans, and he couldn't offer obeisances. He could have physically offered obeisances, but because Sukracharya and other demoniac persons were there, it was uncomfortable or very awkward for him to do so in a social way. It wasn't physically impossible for him, but it was socially awkward. That's an interesting point. That sometimes indicates to us in a subtle way that sometimes devotees, they also have these social obligations. Thakur Bhaktivinoda, in his commentary on Upadeshamrita, he stated that a grihastha will avoid non-devotee association in a different way than a brahmachari or a sannyasi. The brahmachari or sannyasi, they may stay in the temple, or they travel and preach, and only go to temples. But a grihastha has to go to work. And not only does he have to go to work, he has to look at his boss. And not only does he have to look at his boss or the people who are taking services from him, his customers, he has some business or something, not only does he have to look at them, but he has to be nice to them. He even has to be friends with them. Bhaktivinoda says this, it's imperative for a grihastha. Of course, he says the grihastha only does that externally. He does it with sincerity. He asks the person, how is your wife? I heard your grandmother had a surgery. Is she okay now? And the devotee genuinely cares. And people oftentimes, they're so struck by devotees because they see this person really cares for me. He really has some genuine affection for me. It's not, shouldn't be just a show that the devotees put on for that. But nevertheless, they don't reveal their heart to those persons. And so we can see this indirectly indicated in this verse in purport, where it states that Bali Maharaj wanted to offer obeisances to Vamanadev, but he couldn't because of the presence of Shukracharya. So he had some external obligation that he had to meet, but internally, in his mind, in his heart, he was praying to the Lord, he was offering obeisances to the Lord. And Prabhupada says that externally, a devotee may not render full service, but if he's internally sincere and serves the Lord, in serious, the Lord welcomes his service nonetheless. Thus the Lord is known as Bhava-grahi Janardana, because he takes the essence of one's devotional mentality. Now, if we contemplate this, this also is kind of the demarcation point or a dividing line between the Smartas and the Vaishnavas. I live in Jagannath Puri, as Prabhuji was saying, and I've been there for over 25 years now. And it's one of the capitals of the Smarta Brahmins. And I've marked over the years, they chant Hare Krishna, we chant Hare Krishna, we worship the deities, we worship Radha Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Nityananda. They also worship Radha Krishna and even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and even some of them recite Shikshashtaka prayers. They also read Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita like we do. But what is the difference? The difference is that they're more mechanical in their approach, and they stress external things like birth and like strict adherence to particular external rules more than they do the internal mood. Now for devotees, and especially for devotees who want to serve Srila Prabhupada in this international society for Krishna consciousness, meditating on this quality of the Lord, who is Bhava-grahi Janardana, is very important. If we don't see this, then we may become like the Smartas, and we may say, oh, this person's not good because they're born in a non-Vaishnava family, and I was born in a Vaishnava family, or this person's not good because they don't pronounce the Sanskrit properly, or this person's not good because they don't know how to do archana properly, the artik and things, and we may criticize them. We should be very, very careful about that. And as we'll discuss, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't learn to do archana properly. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't learn to pronounce Sanskrit verses properly. That's important. But we have to keep things in their perspective. We have to see that Srila Prabhupada, although it's a fact that in the early days, Srila Prabhupada was teaching Sanskrit to someone who later became Mukunda Maharaj and some of the early devotees, but Srila Prabhupada very quickly stopped that. And the only reason that he did it was because to draw people in, to make them interested in Krishna consciousness. Now, again, as a side note, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't learn Sanskrit. or the Sanskrit is useless or something. But again, the point is we have to keep perspective. Thakur Bhaktivinoda in Krishna Samhita says a very interesting thing. He says that subtle discrimination is extremely important for Vaishnavas. And this is one difference between the Saragrahi, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and the Smartas. Whereas the Smartas, they take things in a literal, what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta called lexicographical or dictionary kind of way. The Saragrahi Vaishnavas, they understand that the Lord is Bhava-grahi. And he appreciates the essence of the devotee's devotional mentality. And as a society, we should be mature enough that we can simultaneously encourage devotees to learn to recite Sanskrit verses properly, to learn to do archana properly, et cetera, and all the different rules and regulations in our society. But at the same time, we should see the most important thing is the mood of the devotee. And I'd like to share with you a few different unusual stories about this from our ISKCON history. One is a famous story you'll find in Prabhupada Lilamrita, which probably you've heard many times. And that is at one time, Srila Prabhupada at 26 Second Avenue was giving a lecture, and then suddenly a drunkard staggered into the temple uninvited and started loudly speaking. And the devotees were disturbed, and they got up to force him out. And Srila Prabhupada said, no, he has something. And the man said, he had a roll of toilet paper in his hand, and he brought it as an offering. And Srila Prabhupada told the devotees, step aside, let him go. And he went back to that little bathroom, which is still there if you visited 26 Second Avenue. I visited in 1994 with our Guru Maharaj. I was his driver. And the little bathroom's still there. And he installed that roll of toilet paper there. And then he staggered out. And Prabhupada commented, just see, even a drunkard can render some service. So this is a principle of Bhava-grahi Janardana. And this is a very, very important principle in our ISKCON society. And for us to function properly as a society, and when I say society, I don't mean to insult all of you and just treat you like you are ISKCON, because who is ISKCON? None of us got Kaivalya Mukti when we got initiated. Now I am ISKCON. Who is ISKCON? ISKCON's not a person, but ISKCON is the Seva Sangha of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada wanted our ISKCON society to be composed of many different individual centers, which are being led by generally one temple president, one senior devotee, and each center would have a little different mood. For example, Gainesville, which was originally started by Amarendra Prabhu, our old friend, they used to call it Geesville because they had such wonderful special prasad. And Srila Prabhupada wanted the society, the devotees, to love each other and appreciate each other, keeping Krishna in the center. And Prabhupada was very proud of the fact that in our society, we have so many different devotees from so many different psychophysical backgrounds. We have, in our society, even today, we have people who vote for Mr. Trump and people who can't stand Mr. Trump. And we have so many different, and that's okay. And we love them because they're Vaishnavas. We don't want to see them by some external thing. So Srila Prabhupada always established from the very beginning the importance of bhakti and the importance of understanding Krishna as Bhava-grahi. And we can see this in a number of other examples. One is that in San Francisco, when they installed the first official deities in ISKCON, Jagannath Baladev, that Pranapratishta ceremony was not done according to any puja padati or Hari Bhakti Vilas or any shastric thing. But Srila Prabhupada had those hippies, some of whom were no doubt intoxicated on LSD and marijuana and things. He had them chant Hare Krishna. And there was no Agnihotra, there was no Pranapratishta where you place mantras on the deity's body, and no Vahana, where you call the deity, the Lord, to come into the body of that deity. There was no archana, there was no abhishek, there was not even any dressing of the deity. The only ceremonies that went on was the chanting of Hare Krishna, and all the devotees took turns waving a candle in front of the naked deities of Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, who didn't even get a bath that day. And the Prabhupada said, now they are installed. And they were installed. And if we have any doubt, then we haven't understood such a very, very important principle that Krishna is Bhava-grahi, Janardana. He's not dependent on all the rules and regulations, but he's dependent upon the mood, the love of his devotees. And because Srila Prabhupada was there, and Srila Prabhupada called for Jagannath Baladev Subhadra to come, then without a doubt, those deities came. And to this day, those deities are there in Berkeley. It's very, very special if you get a chance to go to the West Coast to have darshan of those deities. It's a very, very special thing. Another story that I'd heard from Govinda Dasi, another very early disciple of Srila Prabhupada. She, when she initially joined, she wasn't much of a cook, but she learned to cook after some time, and she was cooking for Srila Prabhupada. And as the society became a little more sophisticated, a little more, one day she came to Srila Prabhupada with a question, a sincere question. She said, Prabhupada, some of the devotees have told me that I should not use powdered hing on Ekadasi. And to this day, I think most devotees don't use powdered hing on Ekadasi. We certainly don't in our ashram, because it has generally some grains in it. It's not pure for Ekadasi. If we use some hing, then we'll take some sap that's made into a hard ball, and we grind that. So it's a good question, an honest question. But what was Srila Prabhupada's response? Govinda Dasi recalls that Prabhupada got angry and started chastising her and told her, don't introduce all these rules and regulations. You're going to spoil everything. So that doesn't mean that we should offer hang to the deity on Ekadasi. Of course, the deity can digest it. It doesn't mean we should cook that way for the devotees, but we should understand the principle of Bhava-grahi Janardana. The Prabhupada saw the importance of the devotion over all the rules and regulations. Another nice story that we heard from Lakshmi Moni, another senior disciple, Srila Prabhupada. She was once there in the center in upstate New York in Buffalo. And the devotees, there was a controversy in the temple, small center there. And the devotees wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada. And they were confused what to do. And the letter said something like this. It said, Srila Prabhupada, we're trying to save money, and so we only use one towel. All the brahmacharis use the same towel. After they finish taking bath, they take turns and they dry off with the same towel. And then after we've all used the towel, we wash it off and dry it, and then we use it for the deities. And some people say that's not proper. Is it okay? What should we do? And Prabhupada's reply was very simple. He said, just bathe the deities more often. He didn't tell them, go buy a new towel. He kept things in a very, very simple way. Now, that doesn't mean that there in Atlanta, we have some of the most important Gornitai deities in our movement that Srila Prabhupada personally established and famously cried in front of, that with Gornitai or your Radha Krishna deities, that you should use a towel that brahmacharis have been using. But it means we should understand the principle that Krishna's Bhava-grahi Janardana. Another final story before we go a little bit on. This is a story I heard personally from Govinda Maharaj, who used to be Ayodhyapati Prabhu, Prabhupada's disciple, who Prabhupada's Samadhi in Vrindavan. And Govinda Maharaj said that he joined, I can't remember where it was that he joined. Someone was on here, you remember, you can maybe comment. Maybe it was in Arizona, I don't remember. Anyway, he said wherever he joined, he'd been in the temple for about 2 weeks. And after being there for 2 weeks, he's become a senior devotee. By that time, the temple president approached him and asked him to do the worship of the deities of Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. And Govinda Maharaj told us that was the first time he'd ever noticed the deities. He was just there in front of the altar every day and they were chanting and things, but he hadn't really paid attention to these statues or whatever he thought they were in front of him there. So he said, okay. And then he asked the temple president, who are they? And the temple president kind of paused for a moment, furrowed his brow and said, actually, I don't know. But we're supposed to worship them. So this was the situation in the early days of our movement. And these are cute stories. These are stories that we don't imitate because they were for a certain particular time and place. And we're telling you stories tonight, my night, I think it's your morning, to illustrate this point of Krishna being Bhava-grahi Janardana and how he appreciates the devotion of the devotees. Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to Mandali Bhadra in 1969, early days of our movement again. And he wrote the following. Ananda Mandali Bhadra had written to him from Vrindavan asking him about worship of the deities. And so Prabhupada wrote him back and gave him some instructions. He said, Ananda has good experience. And you also have seen how we worship the deities in the temple and offer prasadam. So you may kindly follow in the same way. But in everything we do, devotion and sincerity are the real things. There is a phrase in Sanskrit, Bhava-grahi Janardana. This means the Lord accepts service in devotional emotion. If we are sincere in offering something to the Lord in devotional love, he will accept it. The procedure may not be very right, but the desire of being sincere, he accepts our offering. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that he accepts foodstuffs from devotees because they are offered to him in complete love and affection. That is required. Now, let me again make a footnote here that this does not mean that there's no such thing as rules and regulations, and rules and regulations are not important, and we should just, it's from the heart, Prabhu, because we have love. If we do like that, then we may become sahajiyas. And it's the devotion of the temple president, it's the devotion of the head pujari when they demand certain standards, that if you're going to cook for the deities, you have to have second initiation maybe. If you're going to go on the altar, you have to be following all the 4 regulated principles. You have to be chanting 16 rounds. You have to do certain things. You have to do artik when you go on the altar. You have to take bath and wear clean cloth. There's certain rules and regulations. And those rules and regulations, we should understand the motivation we should have in applying them. We don't do rules and regulations for the sake of rules and regulations. We're not the International Society for Rules and Regulations. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, when he speaks about dharma and rules like that, his conclusion is he says, sarva dharma parityagya. Give up all that dharma. He doesn't say sarva papa parityagya. Give up all your sin. He says, give up your dharma and just surrender to me. That surrender is the most important thing. But that surrender is also manifest in the form of a devotee wanting to have the best standard for the deities. In the early days, there was no consideration, for example, about milk. And the milk in those days, it generally had fish oil in it. Prabhupada said, anyway, what can you do? But I think that if we have the same standard today, that anyway, Prabhu, it's okay to offer milk to the deity that has fish oil in it. Prabhupada said so. I think that would be a great mistake because now we have an option. If we have an option, then we should go and do the best thing. And that's a manifestation of our devotion. If we just become lazy and say, oh, it's not necessary to follow rules and regulations, Krishna's Bhava-grahi Janardana, then we'll fall down. And how will we be able to please Srila Prabhupada? We may make him very, very angry. So we should always appreciate the devotees. We should always appreciate the mood of the devotees. There's another letter Srila Prabhupada wrote in 1968 to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. This was on the 19th of August. And Prabhupada wrote him, your appreciation for the service of your God brothers is very laudable. This is actually devotees' business, that everyone should appreciate the value of other devotees. Let me read that again. Prabhupada said, this is actually a devotee's business, that everyone should appreciate the value of other devotees. This is our society. So Prabhupada goes on, nobody should criticize anyone because everyone is engaged in the service of the Lord according to one's capacity. And the thing is, Krishna wants to see how much one is sincere in rendering him service. Krishna is so kind and liberal, he says, that everyone's service, when it is sincerely offered, he accepts. This is a statement in the Bhagavad-gītā, that he accepts a little bit of flour, fruit, and water offered to him in devotion and love. He wants our love and devotion. Otherwise, he's a proprietor of everything. What can we give him? This position of our subordination should always be maintained, and we should always give respect to our pure devotees who are engaged in devotional service. That will make us able to make a progressive march in the devotional line. For some years in Los Angeles, where I joined, I was in charge of the Bhakti program. And right after they gave me that service, I saw right away there was a problem. And I went to the temple president and senior devotees, and I expressed to them what I saw as the problem. And based on my concern, they developed a policy. And the policy was that no one in the temple was allowed to correct or chastise the new devotees except for the bhakta leader. The new bhaktas, only the bhakta leader was able to do it because these poor guys, they just joined, they just shaved their long hair, gave up their jeans and their record collection a few days before. And they moved in the temple, and now they're on the bottom rung of everything, and nobody appreciates them. Everybody's coming and telling them the same things over and over again. Take off your shoes, Prabhu, before you walk in the kitchen. Prabhu, don't eat with your left hand. Don't pick your nose before you water tulsi. Don't do this, don't do that. And they become very, very discouraged. So new people are like this, and these new people, when we speak about them, it's not just the bhaktas, but sometimes when outside people come to the temple, a devotee may insist, hey, what are you doing? You can't behave like that. You can't wear your shoes here in the foyer of the temple. Right? You can't, you have to leave the shoes out there. You have to do this or that. And of course, we have standards for the temple, and we should stick up for this. But our purpose of our movement is not to give rules and regulations to everyone. Our purpose is to appreciate devotion and to bring out the devotion in others. And this is a great art. Srila Prabhupada was able to do that with new people who were drunkards and whoremongers and drug addicts of all kinds, who were coming to his lectures. And even after initiation, they would go outside and smoke cigarettes or go to the ice cream shop down the street and have ice cream that had eggs in it. And Srila Prabhupada was tolerating that. And not only tolerating it, but he was seeing the good in them. And he was glorifying them for it. He was appreciating them for it. Just as Srila Prabhupada is pointing out here in this letter to Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Nobody should criticize anyone because everyone is engaged in the service of the Lord according to one's capacity. And the thing is, Krishna wants to see how much one is sincere in rendering him service. So this is Bhava-grahi, Janardana. Now again, that doesn't mean that we should be lackadaisical in our standards. It doesn't mean that you should tell the temple president or the head pujari when he tells you, look, please don't wear your jeans on the altar, wear some clean cloth or something. You tell him, look, Prabhu, don't be a fanatic. Krishna's Bhava-grahi, Janardana, and you're just caught up in all these rules and regulations. You're on a lower platform. No, he has a business. He has a service. His expression of his devotion is to make sure there's a proper standard that Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas wanted for the deities. That's their devotion. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wrote one letter, which we often comment on, to one of his disciples. And in the letter, he said, I don't know why you are taking it upon yourself to chastise your God brothers. He said, this is my difficult burden as guru. Why do you want to take it upon yourself? So it's the business, my Guru Maharaj used to say, it's the business of guru. It's the business of the leader, the temple president, the head pujari, the Sankirtan leader, the bhakta leader, the parent, the mother or father to the children. It's the business of those authorities to chastise and correct the persons who are under their guidance. And they should do that chastising, that correction with love. And the persons who are working under them should feel that love, and they should feel like, oh, they appreciate what I'm offering, but they're trying to help me to come to an even higher level. And because I don't know the standards properly, they're helping me to learn this. This is very valuable, and I appreciate it. We should feel their sincerity in that way. And we should always, always appreciate and understand that Krishna is Bhava-grahi Janardana. He's not interested in the external amount that you're offering or even the quality, external quality of it, but he sees the devotion. I'd like to tell you a story in this regard about a devotee, a great Vaishnava. His name was Tripuradas. He lived in Rajasthan, and he was a great devotee of the deity of Sri Nathji. And this is a story from that sampradaya. Sri Nathji is a wonderful deity who resides in the southern part of Rajasthan in Nathdwar. And Tripuradas, he was a Kayasta who depends on where you're at in India and what the Kayasas do, but generally they're considered to be Sudras. Ramananda Roy was born in a Kayasta family. But sometimes they're considered to be Brahmins in some places. For example, Madhavi Devi, this is a little note, was a cousin, one of the most intimate associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and also a resident of Bentapur, where Ramananda Roy was born. Madhavi Devi and Sikhi Mahiti, her Madhavi Devi's brother, were also born there, very dear devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Madhavi Devi, according to the local history there, she was in charge of, she was like a scribe for the Madala Panji. The Madala Panji is like a history book of the Jagannath Mandir. And so it's kind of a Brahminical work, but they consider the Kayasas generally to be like Sudras. Anyway, that's a little technical point. So Tripuradas was born in a Kayasta family, but he was a great devotee. And he was a wealthy person. He made a promise that he would make a very opulent quilt, an opulent blanket for Sri Nathji every winter. It gets very cold there in Nathdwar. And so he would make very, very costly cloths that were sewn with solid gold, that had gold rings and sequins in them and jewels. But it wasn't just that the cloths that he made, the blankets that he made were costly, but they were saturated with his love and devotion for the Lord. And every year, that was his service. He would make a very expensive blanket, special blanket, which he would send to Nathdwar for the service of Sri Nathji. So Sri Nathji was very pleased by his service. And so also was the Acharya. The Acharya at that time was Vitalanath. And after some time, as Krishna says in the Bhagavatam, the 10th canto, Yasyaham anagrinami harishitadhanam shanai, that if I really favor someone, I take away all their wealth, and so that everyone rejects them, and then they only have me. And so by the arrangement of the Lord, Tripuradas lost everything. The king came and took all of his wealth away from him. And Tripuradas became so poor that every paisa that he had, they don't even use paisa in India today, as most of you may know, every food grain that he had became something very valuable for himself. He didn't have enough to even properly feed himself. And as the time went by, finally the winter arrived, and then he remembered, oh, I made this promise every year that I would make a special blanket for Sri Nathji, but I can't do that service now. And so Tripuradas began to cry. I made a promise. I promised to the Lord that I would do this service regularly, but now I'm not able to fulfill my promise. And so then Tripuradas was thinking deeply how he could keep his promise. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he says that for those persons who are constantly worshiping him and wanting to please him. The Dani Buddhi Yogam Tam, who gives them intelligence. And Krishna gave intelligence to his dear devotee Tripuradas. And suddenly he noticed there was a little brass pot in his house. He said, oh, I forgot all about that. And so he took that brass pot to the market and he was able to get 1 rupee for it. It's not a lot of money. With that 1 rupee, he was able to buy some very thick cloth. For those of you who live in India, you may have seen it. They have this kind of really thick cloth. It looks actually like what they use for like a burlap sack or something, burlap bag. And he dyed it red. Although it said that he appeared to dye the cloth red, but in reality, he dyed the cloth with his love and devotion for Sri Nathji. And then he dried the cloth in the sunlight of his humility. But still, Tripuradas was thinking, okay, I made this for the Lord, but I can't give this to him. You can't give a burlap bag to the deities. You dyed it red. And he was used to giving valuable cloth which has gold thread sewn into it and gold sequins and jewels and things. The nicest things for Sri Nathji. So Tripuradas thought, I can't offer this to the Lord. He thought, I knew I'll just keep it here. But if somehow someone happens to come, who's on their way to going to Nathdwar, then I'll send it with her. And just the next day, one of the servants of the deity passed by. And so then Tripuradas remembered his promise. And so he gave the cloth to that devotee. And he told him, please give this cloth to the head pujari. And he said, this cloth's not fit to be used even by the servants and maid servants of our acharya. You please take it, but don't tell Vitalanath, the acharya, about this gift. You just give it to the pujari. And so he did like that. He gave it to the head pujari. The head pujari was a nice person. He said, oh, somebody made this for the Lord, but it's a very not second-class thing. It's not appropriate to offer this to the Lord. So he thought, well, anyway, we'll use it. He put it on the altar, on the steps of the altar, so that the other cloths, the opulent cloths that he was using for dressing the deity, could be placed on top of it. But Krishna, who understands the heart of his devotee, Krishna, who's Bhava-grahi Janardana, he couldn't tolerate the negligence that Pujari was offering to his devotee's gift, a gift that was offered with so much love and devotion. And so the Lord came in a dream to the Acharya Vitalanath, and Sri Nathji told him, I'm feeling very, very cold. Please do something about this. So Vitalanath immediately, he got up in the middle of the night and he went and took a bath. And then he went and he took many opulent and beautiful cloths and he wrapped them around the Lord. And then again, Sri Nathji told him, still I feel cold. So then he lit a fire in the deity room. He took all the blankets that they had and wrapped them around the deity. But Sri Nathji said, I'm still not warm. And then Vitalanath was thinking, wait a minute. This is not an ordinary pastime from the Lord. Something's going on here. And he understands that because Krishna, he loves his devotees so much. He's Bhakta-vatsala. He's the Lord who loves his devotees. Sometimes he does some special pastime to give some mercy to a dear devotee. So he called for the pujari. And he said, did anybody offer any new cloth, especially for the winter, because the Lord's cold? And so the head pujari, he had a list and he read it off, all the different various donors who'd offered cloths, blankets for the Lord. But there was no mention of Sri Tripuradas. And Vitalanath was surprised. He said, you didn't mention Tripuradas. What happened to him? He always offers a very beautiful blanket every year. Didn't he offer something this year? And the pujari said, oh, he lost all his money and he couldn't prepare an opulent cloth. So he gave some real like burlap bag cloth, which I'd put on the altar so you can put the deity dresses on. Vitalanath, the Acharya, he understood the intention of the deity and how Krishna is hankering after the love and devotion of his devotee. He's not so impressed by the objects that are given, how much money is given, but he appreciaes the love of the devotee. He's Bhava-grahi. And so he ordered, Vitalanath ordered the pujari, bring me that cloth. And then he gave that cloth to the temple tailor and told him, you make a nice chadar out of this. And then he took all the other blankets and cloths off Sri Nathji. He put out the fire in the deity room and he offered that chadar to Sri Nathji. And Sri Nathji became so very, very pleased with that. He said, yes, this is very, very good. And now I'm completely satisfied. So we should understand this principle, such a very important principle for our individual spiritual lives, but also for the movement that we're pushing on, to understand how the Lord is Bhava-grahi Janardana, and how we should always see and appreciate the devotion of the devotees who may not be perfect. We see there's so many children in the movement who offer things to the deity, who want to do some devotion, and they may not be perfect. Even sometimes we have sannyasis in our society who are giving class and maybe their Sanskrit pronunciation is not so perfect, or they misquote a verse or something. But don't see that. On one occasion, Tamal Krishna Maharaj told a story that Jayananda Prabhu approached him. Now, for those of you who don't know about Jayananda, I think you should. But Jayananda was a senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, who was considered at that time to be the most advanced devotee in the movement. And Prabhupada cried when he left his body and told the devotees to put his disappearance day on our Vaishnava calendar, and that the devotees should all put a picture of Jayananda on the chariots, of the Rath Yatra chariots, to commemorate the service that Jayananda did for the Rath Yatras. So Jayananda was a pretty simple person. He wasn't a big Sanskrit pundit. He was just loved Srila Prabhupada. And once he approached Tamal Krishna Maharaj privately and said, Maharaj, Prabhu, before he took sannyas, he said, I'm not sure if I'm chanting the Gayatri mantra with a proper pronunciation. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj asked him, well, how are you pronouncing it? Tell me. And Jayananda Prabhu told him. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj's eyes got kind of big. And he said, he didn't say anything, but later he went to Srila Prabhupada. He brought Jayananda and he said, Prabhupada, Jayananda Prabhu is not chanting the Gayatri mantra properly. And Prabhupada asked Jayananda, he said, well, how are you pronouncing it? And Jayananda Prabhu then spoke out loud the mantra as he was pronouncing it. And when Srila Prabhupada heard that, Prabhupada just started laughing and laughing. And Prabhupada told him, anyway, just chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada was Bhava-grahi Janardana. He always appreciated the love of his devotees. As our dear Vaisheshika Prabhu comments quite often, Prabhupada would fan the spark. Whatever little tiny spark of devotion was there, Prabhupada would appreciate it. He would glorify it. Prabhupada writes in a purport in Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says, it's a qualification of a Vaishnava that he's adosha darshi. He never sees others' faults. Of course, every human being has both good qualities and faults. Therefore, it is said, Sajjana gunamichanti doshamichanti pamara. Everyone has a combination of faults and glories. But a Vaishnava, a sober man, accepts only a man's glories and not his faults. For flies seek sores, whereas honeybees seek honey. So, dear devotees, I want to finish here, and I'd like to ask if anybody has any reflections or comments. This is such a very, very important principle in our movement. This is what distinguishes ourselves from the Smarta Brahmins. We don't want to become Smarta Brahmins. We also don't want to become sahajiyas. And therefore, subtle discrimination is extremely important. And we should always remember that Krishna is Bhava-grahi Janardana. He appreciates the devotion of his devotee. And we should always see that And we should always, as Srila Prabhupada instructed Tamal Krishna Maharaj, our business is to appreciate the value of other devotees. Just as Srila Prabhupada appreciated the humble offering of that drunkard, that bum off the street who walked in and offered a roll of toilet paper. Somehow he was inspired by that. And Prabhupada said that's the beginning of his devotional life. We should fan the spark in this way. So I want to stop there and ask the devotees if there's any reflections from anyone. It's nice for me to know what you're walking away with, what kind of reflection, impressions you get, or maybe there's some questions. So if anybody has anything, please share them this time.
Hare Krishna, dear Madhavananda Prabhu. Thank you so much. This was one of the sweetest and most enlightening, thought-provoking lectures I've heard in the recent times. Very, very beautiful, Prabhu. I have one question, Prabhuji, if you don't mind. I know the doctor has prescribed you to take rest at a certain time and it's getting late for you, but I'll keep it very brief, Prabhu, because this question sometimes bothers my heart. So you explained how there are how Krishna is bhava-grahi. He accepts the mood, the sentiment of our devotion, and you mentioned that we should appreciate the mood of the devotees. And I agree with that. But Prabhuji, sometimes my difficulty is when we are doing a service together. For example, if I am doing deity worship with a particular devotee, or I am preaching with a particular devotee, or I am doing any project with a devotee, and if there is a disagreement about how the service should be performed, and just putting it bluntly, if I don't like the way, I like the mood, but I don't like a particular way, so the way a devotee is performing a particular service is irritating to me, because it disrupts my mood, or I feel it causes inconvenience to the deity, for example, or it may not be the right example for the devotees, in my opinion. Then, and if the devotees are equal, then how? Because if I say something, the devotee may feel hurt. So how do we appreciate the mood of that devotee, at the same time work on the same project while there are some irritating things about the devotee's peculiar way of performing service? So how to tolerate? Hare Krishna.
Before I address that question, let's back up a little bit from your question and ask you a question, or ask a rhetorical question for ourselves. We may ask, why did Krishna put me in this situation? What does Krishna want me to learn? And let's meditate again on Srila Prabhupada. After they installed Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, one day the devotees had this great idea. Let's take Jagannath out in the park and he'll be with us and we chant. And they just, without any achaman, without wearing proper clean clothes, they just picked up Jagannath and took him out and they just put him on the grass, not even on a blanket or anything. And they chanted around him. And Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada was not pleased. Prabhupada saw that. And Prabhupada said something to them, no, this is not appropriate. You shouldn't take the deity out except on special occasions. But Prabhupada was very gentle with them. And this is perhaps what Krishna wants to teach us. And what is more important, that this particular small rule is achieved in our temple or in our association, or the fact that I learn the art of dealing with a devotee. I think a much more valuable thing to be gained in that exchange is that I can learn how to speak to that devotee. Now, how to do that, that's an individual art. And of course, it depends on the other person. And of course, you know, these are things you know. I can see you're a very gentle, sweet devotee. I think you're connected with Bhakti Charu Maharaj, who's like the personification of sweetness. It's a very great loss to our movement that Maharaj is gone now. We can meditate on his mood, the mood of Radhanath Maharaj and so many great devotees, Srila Prabhupada, and how with so much love and affection, if someone feels this devotee really loves me, and he's really saying this out of love and affection, And there should be a sense of detachment also. The devotee sees, I'm not just trying to be his nanny, his mother. I'm not trying to mother him and chastise him and correct him, but I really love him, and I'm just being honest, and it disturbs me. Maybe we'll be successful. And if we're not successful, then the next art is how to, if it really disturbs us, and that disturbance is not necessarily a mundane disturbance. Maybe you're disturbed because Krishna's in your heart, your guru is in your heart, and they're not happy with that thing going on. That might be, or it might just be your material conditioning. That's also possible. But that disturbance in the heart may be there because Krishna is disturbed. So then what can I do? So then I don't want to hurt the feelings of that devotee. I don't want to publicly embarrass him, humiliate him. So I may go to some senior devotee, the temple president or someone, and say something to that person and see if it can be reconciled. And that's what, maybe have just some discussion. Let's have some discussion with the senior devotee, not in a public way or something, and not in a chastising way, but what is the best thing that we can do? And always, I think in these situations, what is Krishna trying to teach me? And in this kind of situation, what will come to my mind, Krishna wants me to learn how to deal with the Vaishnavas. Not just about this particular rule or something, which may be a petty thing, which I'm hung up about, but a much, much more valuable thing. How can I learn to deal with the Vaishnavas? That's my humble thought.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, that was such an enlightening reply, such an enlightening answer, that we should always think, what is Krishna trying to teach? And the concept of it being an individual art, that is also very, very important. I took away from your answer, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Prabhu, I'm sorry, but one last question, Prabhu, from my side. So Prabhu, you said that we should try to learn deity worship nicely. We should try to learn to recite the Sanskrit and Bengali verses nicely. Srila Prabhupada has given us the pronunciation guide, the diacritics and everything. And you said if somebody is giving a lecture, some sannyasi, some senior leader is giving a lecture, and there is some verses misquoted or some verses not pronounced properly, we should not judge, you said. And yes, that is very important, Prabhuji. But at the same time, if someone comes and says that in ISKCON, you don't have very advanced devotees, whereas outside ISKCON, they are very Vrajrasik and they can quote nice verses, and they can go very deep in the rasa. Whereas you are only talking about you are not this body, you are the soul, and impersonalism and this and that, very basic. So let's take Shiksha outside ISKCON, from outside ISKCON. So Hare Krishna, how to deal with that? I know I have read some very, very nice instructions from Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj in the book When Good Fortune Arises. When he when he was approached with that question, he was like a lion. But in today's day and age, Prabhuji, how to deal when devotees go, here?
Well, first of all, we are friends with people when we're honest. If someone comes to us, and let me speak in a very blunt, unpalatable way, but if someone comes and says, look, I heard that some bad things happened to some of the children in your movement. It won't help if you say, no, that's not true. That never happened. All they have to do is go on the internet, and they'll hear the testimonies from so many children who had problems, and that's a work in progress of changing that. So it won't help to deny that. So the first thing I always try to do is to be honest with someone. If someone says, oh, you people, you don't pronounce Sanskrit and Bengali. And I tell them, you're right. So much of the time, most of the devotees in our movement don't. That's part of the glory of our movement, that we're taking brand new people from the West who are not coming from a background of Sanskrit or Bengali, and they're being introduced to bhakti. And we're looking to see the essence of things, not just their pronunciation. But if you're hung up about pronunciation, or if you want to hear some higher things, let me take and introduce you to a few people in our movement. This is Amarendra Prabhu, disciple of Radha Govinda. This is Hari Parshad Prabhu. This is Radha Govinda Maharaj. Here's some books by another disciple, Srila Prabhupada. His name is Gaur Govinda Maharaj. This is a book called Embankment of Separation, or Mathura Meets Vrindavan. And you please look at that. We're an international movement. And we preach to people who are butchers and drug addicts and prostitutes and people right off the streets. And we introduce them to bhakti. And we can't speak to them about Radha Rasa Sudha Nidhi on the first day. We're speaking to them about Bhagavad-Gita and stress management and things which are applicable for them. That's natural. But we have so many things in our society. And I have a question for you, my dear devotee. You may tell him that why do you think that bhakti is such a mechanical thing that it's only the property of an institution? Why do you think that ISKCON cannot have Sudha Bhakti? Because it's an institution and you're going to go to some other place. Why do you have this attitude that bhakti is the property of an institution, or an institution can't have bhakti? That's a very, very mundane attitude. That's not Krishna conscious. That's not what Krishna says in the Gita. That's not what we read in the Bhagavatam. That's not rasik. That's a very mechanical, racist, materialistic kind of calculation. Why are you thinking like that? We're not hung up like that. We appreciate all Vaishnavas. We appreciate all different persons, even they may be Christians or Muslims, or even an atheist. If he's an honest person, we can appreciate he's an honest person. We can appreciate everyone. We have our society. This is a Seva Sangha of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And we're faithful members, team members in this society. But we don't think, Prabhupada said there are many societies of pure devotees. We give respect to others. But this is a Seva Sangha of our Guru Maharaj and our Param Gurudev. And we serve here. And of course there's some problems. You have no problems in your family? Are all the members of your family perfect? Are all the members of your society perfect? Nobody can say that. And we're a big society with many new members, so we have more problems. That's part of the glory of our society. You might say something like that.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Very beautiful answer. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, what time do we have to end? How much?
Well, maybe if there's another reflection or two from some other devotees.
Okay. So, yes. Dear devotees, please, if you have any question, quickly raise your hand.
But it doesn't just mean questions. If you have some reflection,
sure,
something you liked, as our Sheila says, what did you come away with? What was your impression? I appreciate it. It also helps me to know that not everybody was phone sick too. Appreciate it.
Yes, Radha, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat pranam. Srila Prabhupada, thank you for such a wonderful lecture.
Very, very hard for me to hear you. There's
I have a question which is a little equally to what Adigraj is doing deity worship.
better now.
Is it better now? So if a senior devotee is doing deity worship and if a junior devotee is assisting the senior devotee and the senior devotee is making some mistake in deity worship, how does a junior devotee approach this situation?
It reminds me of one Gaudiya Vaishnav that I came in contact with in Orissa. I've been living in Orissa for 25 years, and we do research in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and I come in touch with many different Vaishnavas. And although I'm a staunch member of Srila Prabhupada Society, I also have friends in other places. There was one Vaishnav who had many disciples, and when he was giving his disciples the Gayatri mantra, he didn't pronounce it properly. He gave the mantra incorrectly. Now, one of his disciples later became guru. And when he would chant the mantra that he got, he would pronounce it the way his guru gave him. But when he would give the mantra to his disciples, he pronounced it properly because he respected his Gurudev. So those senior devotees, those are our Guru Janas. And I'm not just talking about Prabhupada disciples, but any person who's very senior to us and been very kind to us, we should appreciate them. And it's not my business to find fault with them. I may not do the same practice that they do. Just like Srila Prabhupada, when the deities of Radha Shyam Sundar were installed in Vrindavan, Prabhupada had, what's his name, Krishna Kun, with the tailor shop across the street from Rescue Harila, Ganga Prasad. He had Ganga Prasad come and dress the deities. It's the first time. And Ganga Prasad went there. Some of the devotees remember Ganga Prasad, he had pins, right? When we dress the deity, we pin them up in different ways. Ganga Prasad was keeping the pins in his mouth. And he would take them out and pin the deities with them. So he's Ganga Prasad. He's a Brijbasi, born and raised in Vrindavan, left his body in Vrindavan, and a friend of Srila Prabhupada, and a friend of our movement. Nobody, as far as I know, chastised him for that. But it's not that we should.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I think Prabhuji dropped off. They got disconnected, I think.
Yes, Prabhu, we'll just wait.
Okay.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Offer that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we have Hari Parshad Prabhu on the line. Hari Parshad Prabhu, thank you so much for joining. Prabhuji, we should wait now. Prabhuji will join back, you think? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Narayan is also okay. And then the third one said that actually the Supreme Lord is pleased by anime.
Hare Krishna. Madhavanand Prabhu, we had lost you, Prabhu. So
Yeah,
please
sorry. I have some computer problems, and because of the lockdown, that's why I'm here in Mayapur instead of Puri. We can't travel right now, and I can't also take my computer to get fixed. And sometimes I have some serious problems. Anyway, I'm back. I'm sorry. So Mataji, in answer to your question, we were giving this example of Gopal Ghosh, Ganga Prasad, I'm sorry, Ganga Prasad, who was keeping the pins in his mouth. We don't imitate that, but we also don't criticize it, and we don't teach that to other persons. So, of course, it depends upon the severity of what's going on. If someone's doing something very nasty, very muchi, something really offensive with the deities, then we should approach that person privately, not embarrass them, approach them privately and say, my dear devotee, I don't understand, and say something. And then if we still can't rectify them, then we may go to some authority or someone like that. Is that helpful, something, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
I'm sorry, everybody.
No, thank you, Madhavanand Prabhu. Shrikant Prabhu, you want to make the last comment or question real quick? Go ahead,
Yes.
you have raised your hand.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for your wonderful lecture. I enjoyed the story about in New York. A drunkard came and he gave an offering of the toilet paper. What struck me was Prabhupada's compassion, maturity, and appreciation. I mean, it requires a different set of mindset to appreciate that. So it was very enlightening. I enjoyed that. So thank you for sharing the story. I had a question. As we talked about bhakti, so as we do our Hare Krishna japa, where I struggle is am I doing it mechanical or do I really have bhakti? And I struggle to differentiate my internal emotion. Is it enthusiasm or is it actually a bhakti? So to appreciate your experiences, any thought around that?
Well, first of all, in the Brihanaradiya Purana, there's a verse which is often quoted by our acharyas when they speak about bhakti. The verse goes like this: Bhakti stu bhagavad bhakti sangena parijayate. The bhakti comes from the devotees. I don't really know Krishna. You may have some devotion, but if you have some devotion, it's come because of maybe Srila Prabhupada. You read something in Krishna book about Krishna, and because of your contact with Srila Prabhupada's movement and Prabhupada's books, and Prabhupada himself through his books, you have some devotion. So we cultivate that devotion with devotees, and therefore we come together and we hear and chant. We have Krishna Katha like this. And because it's natural to love one another, it's difficult to love Krishna, and a tendency is there to be sentimental, or as Prabhupada would sometimes say, this is sahajiya. It's a tendency to be like that we just imagine something, oh, I love Krishna, Krishna's like this or like that. But when we deal directly with someone and we have exchanges with that person, the person gives us a gift, it does some favor for us, we do something for them, then it's natural we have some love and affection. And the more that we chant the holy names with those persons, to the extent that it's said in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Tati Krishna Bhaji Kori Guru Seva, that the service to our Guru Dev is our Krishna Bhajan. I'm doing this Krishna bhajan not because I'm such a great devotee of Krishna, but I'm doing it because it pleases Gurudev. And that's very, very powerful. When we do like that, when we have love and devotion for Gurudev, then we develop love and devotion for Krishna. Yashadevi para bhakta yatate tata guru. Whatever devotion I have for my Guru, that devotion will come also to Krishna. Is that helpful, Shrikant Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Now that's helpful. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much. Such a very beautiful and important question. Any other questions with any last things?
Geeta Mataji, go ahead. Prabhuji, Geeta Mataji has one last question, please. Geeta Mataji,
Okay.
go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much for the nice lecture. Can you please explain to me what are the practical symptoms of someone who loves the Guru?
What are the practical symptoms of someone who loves the Guru? Well, there's Bahiranga Lakshana, there's external symptoms, and there's Antaranga Lakshana. And the problem is that it's very difficult to tell just by the externals. And we may look to see, oh, does this person always wear a dhoti? Oh, he's not wearing a dhoti, so he can't be a good devotee. But Jayananda Prabhu wasn't wearing a dhoti, nor do I think Garuda or Jatayu were wearing dhotis. Although sometimes we picture them like that. It's not that someone wearing a dhoti makes him a good devotee. We may do some external things, especially important things like coming to the temple, and that's a reflection of our devotion for Guru. But ultimately, it's something internal. And we have to understand, there's a saying in Bengali from Jagadananda Pandit. He said that Vaishnava chiniti nai Devata Shakati, that even the demigods whose powers of perception are so infinitely vast compared to ours, that Agni Dev can perceive with his senses wherever there's fire, in the bellies of everyone. There's fire in the belly. There's fire in when someone's lighting a cigarette. There's fire in a building when someone's burning something. Agni Dev can appreciate all that, can perceive through that. Vayu can appreciate and perceive wherever there's air. And the demigods are so very, very powerful, but Vaishnava Chiniti Nai Devata Shakati. They don't have the power to appreciate a Vaishnava. So then how do we appreciate a Vaishnava? How can we see a Vaishnava? By the mercy of that Vaishnava. When we're humbly serving them. And many devotees, they said, I'll tell you a quick story about one of my heroes. Two of my heroes, actually. In the early days in San Francisco, the devotees were serving so many people in the community. Even, who was this fellow, the poet, hippie fellow, Allen Ginsberg. He came and he told all the hippies that I highly recommend that after you've taken LSD, some night in the morning, you go to the morning program at the Hare Krishna temple. It's a great way to come down. These are the kind of people the devotees were dealing with. And it was like having a hospital in a war zone. And they were helping so many people. And they were distributing prasadam to so many people. And sometimes after some days of prasadam, someone would become a little more sincere. One day, one young man approached one of the devotees and said, yeah, you know, it's really good food. I really appreciate you people. And I'd like to help. What can I do? And so this devotee told him, well, you can do some service. Why don't you go ask him? And that devotee pointed to some other male devotee. And the young man went over to that male devotee, and he was surprised that he was not dressed in a dhoti. He was dressed in old jeans, and his clothes were pretty dirty and kind of ratty. And he said, well, they sent me over here to ask if I can help somehow. And the man said, sure. He said, I'm the garbage man here, and you can help me take out the garbage. Take out the garbage. Okay, this doesn't sound so romantic, but anyway. So he spent the whole day with him, and they filled up a big truck with garbage. They took it to the dump. And as he spent the day with that so-called garbage man devotee, that young man was so impressed, he thought to himself, my God, this man is the happiest person I've ever met in my life. And he's the garbage man. If he's the garbage man, I want to become a devotee. Mm-hmm. Later on, he found out that the so-called garbage man was actually the temple president. His name was Jayananda Prabhu. And that young man later got initiated. He became Vatsal Prabhu, and he was my first temple president. And he told me this story personally. So we can't see a Vaishnava with our own mundane eyes, but by the blessings of the Vaishnava, when we render service, then we can see the Vaishnava. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, to answer your question more directly, in Harinam Chintamani, he says that the Sarup Lakshana, or primary characteristic of a devotee, or meaning a disciple of Guru, is saranagati, is surrender. And so we should look for that surrender. But that surrender is not just something we make a show with. And sometimes, honestly, in our society, there have been people who've been really expert at making shows as being a great disciple of their guru or a great devotee in the movement and being very, very surrendered. But one thing is there, when they've been doing the same thing for 20 years, for 30 years, for 40 years, then we can understand this devotee is very, very sincere. This person is very, very special. And we should appreciate that. We should appreciate, as Srila Prabhupada told in a letter to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, we should appreciate our businesses to appreciate all the devotees and see the good in all the devotees and appreciate whatever services they're doing. So I hope there's some help for you, Gita Dasi. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Madhavanand Prabhu, I'm so grateful to you. So grateful to you. I don't have words to express. Very grateful to you and also to Krishna Kunda Mataji. And it will be incomplete if I don't express my gratitude to His Grace Hari Parshad Prabhu, who originally connected me to you. And he's on the call, and he actually wrote a comment. I'll quickly read it. Haripashad Prabhu said, "Thank you, Madhavananda Prabhu, for this wonderful talk. Really happy to see you." Smiley face. So, Haripashad Prabhu, are you there still on the call? You want to say Haribol to? I don't see. I think he dropped off. And also to Amarendra Prabhu, I'm very grateful. You mentioned both of them. It was Amarendra Prabhu who introduced me to Krishna Kathamrit Bindu. And then I got hooked. I got completely hooked. So thank you, Prabhuji. Very grateful for your association. And dear devotees, please unmute yourself. We are going to thank Madhavananda Prabhu and Krishna Kunda Mataji. And Prabhuji, we pray and hope that you are able to give us your continued association in the future also. Thank you. Thank you. So dear devotees, 1, 2, 3, let us offer our gratitude to Madhavananda Prabhu and Krishna Kunda Mataji by 3 times loudly chanting
Hare Bol!
Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Jai Sri Prabhupada.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
All glories to the devotees of the Bhava-grahi. All glories to Sheila.
Hare Krishna.
Listen to the
Patitanam
Titanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.
His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu ki jai. Hare
Jai.
Krishna.
Jai.
Kunda Mataji ki jai.
Jai Ho.
Jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare. Thank you, Prabhuji. Koti Dandavat Pranam to your sincere seva. Hare Krishna.